So, Tova, tell me about the religious upbringing you received. You mentioned on your blog, The Righteous Rasha, that you're a Beis Yaakov graduate. So, tell me a little bit more about the type of Judaism you were raised with.
Well, the funny thing is it's true that I'm a Beis Yaakov graduate, but I never would consider myself a Beis Yaakov girl. I think they're two totally different things. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but everybody will always, they'll always say to me, "Oh, you're a Beis Yaakov girl." Well, no, I'm not. I went to school there. It's not the same thing. I'd probably have to say that my upbringing was very modern Orthodox. My parents would never call themselves this, but that's definitely what they were. It's like we didn't eat Chalav Yisrael. We listened to rock and roll music. We didn't read the Fumi novels. Everything was they wanted us to have a normal life. It wasn't like, Judaism needs to be this all-controlling entity that's totally going to ruin your life. That really was not their attitude. They wanted us to have fun, and they wanted us to be skeptics. All of my siblings, my parents definitely encouraged that, and they always wanted us to ask questions and just be honest with ourselves. If we had a question and one of our rabbis, couldn't answer it for us, we were going to keep asking until we had an answer. I mean, they weren't satisfied with being told what to do without giving an explanation for it.
Right. And your mother converted to Judaism. How was she treated by your religious community as a convert to Judaism?
Well, initially, my mother was raised Protestant. My grandparents are wonderful, wonderful people. They're these very, left-wing Protestant Christians. And her first conversion was not an Orthodox one. And then as she became more religious, she eventually had an Orthodox conversion. And she's actually kind of lucky that she did it here in Michigan because our Vad HaRabbanan is basically the strictest one that exists regarding conversions. So if you want your conversion to be accepted by everybody, you go to Detroit, basically. But I feel like she's been mainly accepted. I mean, a lot of people don't even know she's a convert. I think that has to do with the acceptance. I think if more people knew she wasn't always Jewish, they might look at her a little bit differently. I mean, I know they see her as quirky. I mean, my mom is not your typical frum woman. I mean, she comes home from work and has a beer. I mean, like, she's not like a frummie that wears a shaitel all the time, and that's just not who she is. So, I mean, they accept her. She's like this quirky woman. That's how they see her, but they all love her. I don't know if everybody knows that she's a convert. I mean, it's not like this thing that we shout from the rooftops. I think it's known, just not so widely. So, I mean, I guess I would say she's accepted, but it could probably be a little bit better. I mean, anytime you enter a community that you don't know or wasn't always your community, there's going to be problems. But I think for the most part, they've accepted her.
When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, God. It depends which age. It was constantly changing. I guess in the back of my mind, I always wanted to write, which is kind of funny because I'm writing now. From the time before I could even write properly, before I even knew how to spell correctly, I was always taking these little stacks of paper and stapling them together and drawing little books. I'd have this orange crayon and a purple crayon, and I would write and illustrate my own little books with horrible spelling that only I could understand. I guess I always wanted to be a writer. I kind of flirted with other careers. I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to be a doctor. Things that required using your brain. But, I mean, I really always wanted to write. I still want to write. I mean, who knows if you can make a living writing. I mean, I'm saying this to you. But, it's something that I always wanted to do. And even though I had different career ideas as I matured, the writing was always kind of in the back of my head, because it was always something that I was good at and something that I got a lot of joy out of doing.
What kind of student were you in elementary school and high school?
You mean like what quality student or like what was my... Okay. I was a good student. It really depends on which school you're talking about because from kindergarten through fourth grade, I went to it was a much less strict school. It was like a modern Orthodox kind of religious Zionist day school. I was always a good student there. Then in fifth grade, I transferred to Beis Yaakov, and that's where I went until I graduated high school. But I was always a good student, but they had so many classes. I mean, I remember in high school, at one point, I was taking something like, oh, God, it's got to be 11, 12, 13 classes. And the English subjects, all the secular stuff I was just kind of good at automatically, except for math. Math I always had to work at, but I was okay. So that stuff was okay, but like the Jewish subjects, there were just so many of them, and sometimes I was just like, screw this. I'll get a C in the class. It's not going to affect my GPA. And there were just so many of them I didn't want to put in the effort, in addition to which a lot of the teachers didn't like me because I asked too many questions that they weren't comfortable with. So sometimes on an exam, for example, they would give you a question and ask you your interpretation of something. Like they would say, okay, in the Chumash it talks about this. Here's what the Ramban says. Interpret it. If you gave an interpretation that they didn't like, you were not going to get a good score on the exam. So, it's one of those types of situations. But, I always think I was a pretty good student. I sometimes got, a couple of C's here or there. But for the most part, a good student. Everybody thought of me as smart, even if they thought I was at risk, I guess you could say. But, I was a pretty good student. I've never been one of those types of people to think that, slacking off is acceptable. The only time I would ever accept a C is if the teacher was a total jerk and I didn't feel like dealing with them, or if the subject was just, too much for me. I mean, when you're 16, 17 years old and they're giving you 12, 13 classes to learn, and so many of them are just repeating the same stuff, it didn't seem necessary for me to put in the effort, especially when that wasn't going to affect my future. I mean, how many times do you really need to be told the laws of tznius and yichud and all of that kind of stuff? I mean, you don't need to be told it that many times, according to me. So, I mean, a good student, but sometimes a little bit lazy.
Well, judging by your latest blog post, the laws of tznius and yichud didn't...
It didn't take. Yeah, I'd have to. Yeah, it didn't take. I'd have to say that. Look. My family was never. My family is not prudish, and I really have to say, look. I mean, my parents don't want me walking around in short shorts and a halter top, but they really don't care if I wear jeans, and they don't care if I wear short sleeves, and they just don't want me to look like a hooker. I mean, that's basically how it goes. Obviously, when I went to Beis Yaakov, they were stricter because they didn't want me to get in trouble with school. But, and they always said, it's stupid to stay away from boys. I mean, don't go around, sleeping around with them, but talk to boys. Be friends with boys. You need to know them. They're half of the planet. I mean, I think it's so insane that basically my school was telling me, you need to segregate yourselves from half of society. I mean, I think that's very dangerous. That's a very, very dangerous outlook on life. And why else do you think that there are so many kids that go on shidduch dates? They've never talked to somebody of the opposite sex before seriously in their life. Then they're supposed to get engaged after 3, 4, 5, 6 dates. I mean, how on earth are you supposed to know that person? You don't know how to communicate with the opposite gender. You don't know what their personalities are like. You don't know what they're interested in. And that's why my parents always said, don't be a whore, talk with men and, hang out with men. So I guess maybe that's kind of why I don't have these hang-ups. I mean, and then you get some people who blend seamlessly into married life after being segregated from men all their lives. You go figure that one out. I have no idea how they do it. So I don't think it's healthy. So it's basically, if I like a guy, I'm gonna see him. I'm gonna get involved with him. I'm not gonna say to myself, stay away from him. He's dangerous. How is he any more dangerous than I am?
What was your reputation in high school?
What was my reputation in high school? Oh, man. That's a good question. I was always seen as the really smart but really weird one. I don't want to say I was unpopular. I never was like the very popular kid in the class. I did have a few friends that I was very, very close with, and everybody else I was just sort of cordial. When I entered Beis Yaakov, that was right during the height of the clique period, so everybody had their own little groups, and it was really hard to make genuine friends. But after 7th or 8th grade, I'd say once I entered high school, the people that you couldn't stand, you were at least able to be cordial with, and the other people you were able to have really good friendships with. So I guess I just had this reputation of being really smart, but really weird. I was always listening to music. I always had my headphones on. Sometimes I even had my headphones on during class. Don't tell anybody. I was always drumming on a desk to something, because at the time I was still a drummer. I had this reputation of being really quirky. People liked me, but they didn't see me as approachable because I was so different from them, I didn't have this Haredi black hat background. I didn't listen to their music. I didn't read their books. but they all liked me because they knew I was real. I mean, they knew I wasn't going to adopt their cultural practices just to satisfy them. They knew I was going to be who I was going to be. And I guess